Hey Fight fans, I'm Sarah Davis and you're watching Fight News Now Extra. I hope you had a great weekend. We have some stories to get to from UFC on FX and the TUF 16 finale. And then stay tuned to hear from our MMA panel. Let's get started with the Newsmakers. George St-Pierre is firing back at Johnny Hendricks, saying that Nick Diaz makes the most sense for his next opponent. Hendricks has expressed frustration over not getting the next shot at the welterweight belt, but GSP says he's not ducking him and is taking one fight at a time. At UFC on FX6 this past weekend, Hector Lombard stopped Rousimar Paul Harris in the first round, and post-fight, Lombard says he wants Michael Bisping next. Apparently, Lombard is bothered by the British fighter, and he'd like to meet him in the octagon soon. But Dana White said otherwise on Saturday night. Bisping is set to fight Vitor Belfort on January 19th in Brazil, and if he wins, the UFC president says that Bisping will get a shot at middleweight champion Anderson Silva. That's the latest news from the UFC. Let's hear from our MMA panel, John Pollock and John Ramdeen. And guys, did you enjoy all the fights this weekend?
Well, me and John Ramdeen successfully watched 21 UFC fights from this past weekend across two different continents. Starting off Friday night in Australia, Ross Pearson and Hector Lombard both returning to the win column. Very strong performances. First of all, Hector Lombard, I think, justifying that contract. I thought this was a must-needed win over Rousimar Paul Harris.
Yeah, again, I don't know if his performance justifies the $700,000 that he got in comparison to some of the other guys. But yes, there was so much hype with Hector Lombard coming from Bellator, being a champion. How will it translate inside of the octagon? He didn't look great against Tim Boetsch, but who does look good against Tim Boetsch? They say octagon jitters are real. Well, Hector Lombard definitely shook those and looked phenomenal. But you also have to credit the fact that Paul Harris said that he broke his foot early in that first round, and that could be a factor.
Fight also ended early in the first round.
Yeah, well, I mean, I
think Lombard hurt his fist from connecting with Paul Harris and putting him to sleep. Ross Pearson, though, back at 155. Does he stay at 155? I think he should.
I mean, he should, because he says he felt good at 155 pounds. But if you look, when you look at some of the other guys that are in that weight division, specifically the champion Ben Henderson, these guys are massive guys. Ben Henderson, many people believe that he could go up and fight at 170 pounds. So you really just have to give yourself as much wiggle room and try to compete where you're the biggest. And for Ross Pearson, 155 pounds just isn't that division.
We move over to Saturday night and the TUF 16 finale. It was headlined by Roy Nelson, stopping Matt Mitrione. I thought Mitrione coming out of the gate, showing some improved footwork, but ultimately Roy Nelson here connecting and knocking the mouthpiece right out of Mitrione, which I think kind of surprised him here at just Nelson catching him, and that was it for Roy Nelson, stopping Mitrione.
Yeah, it's unfortunate for Matt Mitrione. Roy Nelson is seasoned, he's skilled, he's durable, but when you look at him, you don't expect to get the full package, and you do have the full package with Roy Nelson. Matt Mitrione is very similar to Brock Lesnar, where he just doesn't have enough in-ring experience. The guy hasn't faced the top-level guys or had success against top-level guys, and at this stage of the game, it might be
I would have loved to have seen this guy get in at a much younger age, and especially you look at him getting in so late, missing over a year of action, just compounded with injuries and other problems. I mean, he hadn't fought since October of last year. That's a killer when you're 34.
Yeah, and there's so many factors. You add on top of that he's training at one of the toughest camps in the game right now in the Black Zillions. So, I mean, time might be ticking on Matt Mitrione. We know that it is, but I don't know how many fights he has, considering the heavyweight division is as deep and as dangerous as it's ever been.
Colton Smith, he got the Ultimate Fighter welterweight contract coming out of season 16, defeating Mike Ricci. A surprise to me because I watched this entire season, and yes, Colton Smith was kind of that annoying grappler that got on top, but I thought Mike Ricci was not going to have too many problems even fighting at 170 here. Very much the opposite here, where Colton Smith controlled him for 3 rounds and got the decision.
Everybody talks about who's in the corner of Mike Ricci. We know Rory McDonald and, of course, his coach, Firas Zahabi, but you also have to talk about who is in the corner of Colton Smith. Tim Kennedy, a guy that fought for the Strikeforce Middleweight Championship of the World, knows how to win fights. How do you win against Mike Ricci? You don't let him use his range. You don't let him get off with those kicks. put him on his back and make it a grinding fight, and that is exactly what Colton Smith did. He played the smart game, get the victory, but we know that Mike Ricci is a natural lightweight. He's going to go down to 155 pounds in March.
And I fully expect he'll get another opportunity in the UFC. Some definite candidates for knockout of the night. Pat Barry ultimately getting that bonus in his fight, but as well we had Mike Pyle. We had the debuting Rustam Habilov, who's fighting out of Jackson and Winklejohn's camp. I mean, for a night of finishes, only 2 fights going to the decision on Saturday.
Yeah, it was very, very exciting for mixed martial arts fans. I'm glad you referenced Shane Del Rosario and Pat Barry. Pat Barry, though, continues to prove that he has so many deficiencies on the ground. If there was somebody else that had a little bit better jiu-jitsu game, I think that fight would have been finished in the second round. And I wouldn't be surprised if Shane Del Rosario decides, you know what, the heavyweights are way too big. Let's go down to 205 pounds, and let's see if we can make a splash there.
Quickly, let's chat about some of the announcements that were made on Saturday night as well. George St-Pierre, Nick Diaz official, as well as Rory McDonald, Carlos Condit, March 16th at UFC 158. And the surprise fight added, Jake Ellenberger fighting Johnny Hendricks in This Is Our Insurance fight in case Nick Diaz does not make it to Montreal.
Yeah, I love that. And we know that Mike Ricci is also going to be fighting on that card as well. I don't know if I necessarily like the fact that it's the rematch between Rory and Carlos Condit. I know a lot of people want to see that matchup, but I would have liked to have seen Johnny Hendricks and Rory McDonald, and I guess you would have been stuck with the rematch between Carlos
Here's
Condit.
the issue I think they have with that, is that if Rory beats Hendricks, you've killed off a contender, and I don't think Rory is going to take that fight with George, no matter what conspiracy theories people have. I just think that's probably the way they're looking at it, and they're simply keeping Rory busy.
Hey, you guys are the experts, right?
Well, we try to be, Sarah. Every now and then we strike gold.
You do. Thank you. Okay, and seeing as the holidays are fast approaching and everyone is so busy at this time of year, make sure you download our Fight Network app for your iPhone or Android phone, like the Samsung Rugby LTE. That way, you can stay up to date on the latest combat sports stories and even watch our latest updates. We have videos on here as well. Okay, now stay with us here on Fight News Now Extra. We have a lot of recaps to get to.